Hey there, so glad you're here. This is Reddit Stories Podcast. Relax, you're safe here. Here's our first story. My entitled neighbor called the cops on my 3-year-old. So this happened a couple of months ago, but I've been sitting on it for a while. I still can't believe it actually happened, and I figured now's a good time to share. I'm a mom of 2. My daughter is 3 and my son is 5. We live in a quiet little neighborhood where most people just mind their own business. Everyone keeps their lawns tidy, waves hello, and lets kids be kids. Well, almost everyone. Then there's Karen. It was a nice Saturday afternoon. Not too hot, sunny but with a breeze. I was in the front yard trimming some hedges and pulling weeds while the kids played tag in the grass. Nothing crazy, just laughing, running around, and doing the normal loud but happy kid thing. I had a lawn chair nearby with my gloves and water bottle on it. I never left them out of my sight. We were maybe 10 feet apart the whole time. That's when Karen made her grand entrance. She lives across the street from us in a spotless white house with a perfect lawn and a no soliciting sign that she once pointed to when my son tried to sell her fundraiser chocolate. She marched over to me, arms crossed, lips already pursed like she had been chewing on a lemon. "Can you ask your kids to quiet down?" she said. "Some of us actually like peace and quiet." I was polite. I really was. I told her they were just playing tag and I was right there watching them. She huffed, muttered something under her breath, and walked back to her house. I figured that was the end of it. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Maybe 20 minutes later, she comes back again. This time, she's clearly irritated. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "They've been screaming nonstop. I have a headache. Can't they play inside?" I told her calmly that they were just being normal kids and we were enjoying the weather. She didn't like that answer at all. "You clearly don't know how to raise them if you think this is acceptable," she said. That ticked me off, but I still kept my cool. I told her I was supervising them. They weren't bothering anyone else, and they had every right to play in their own yard. She gave me this nasty look and said, "Fine, don't say I didn't warn you," before storming back across the street. I didn't think she'd actually do anything. I really didn't. But 10 minutes later, a police car pulls up. The officer gets out and walks over to me, completely calm. He tells me they got a report about unsupervised children and excessive noise. I just looked at him and laughed because, really? I pointed to my kids, still laughing and running in the grass, and then pointed to myself with my gloves and hedge clippers. "I've been right here the whole time," I said. "They're just playing tag." He nodded, clearly already putting the pieces together. I could tell he wasn't new to Karen nonsense. "Honestly," he said, "this sounds like a neighbor who doesn't like kids being outside." "Yep," I said, "you nailed it." He thanked me for cooperating, told me that there was nothing to worry about and to enjoy the rest of my day. Then he got back in his car and drove off. And of course, when I looked across the street, there she was, peeking out from behind her blinds. I waved at her. She slammed them shut so hard, I heard it from my yard. And you know what? That moment felt amazing. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just let her make a fool of herself and watched the whole thing fall apart. Some people really think they can control everyone around them, like the world is supposed to cater to their every whim. But life doesn't work that way. And if you think calling the cops on a 3-year-old is a good idea, maybe it's time to look in the mirror. I'll never understand how some people act like the sound of kids playing outside is a personal attack. We're talking about laughter and tag, not a rock concert. If you're that bothered by normal childhood happiness in the middle of the day, maybe it's not the neighborhood that's the problem. You ever notice how some people treat kids playing outside like it's a personal attack on their peace treaty with the universe? Maybe they really are just allergic to fun. In that case, I suggest a heavy dose of minding your own business, twice daily, with water. Am I the jerk for bailing on a holiday my dad paid for after he embarrassed me on the flight? My dad, 52 male, had been planning this trip for months for him and me. I'm 26 female. It was supposed to be a father-daughter holiday, just the two of us. He paid for my ticket, the hotel, and even sent me some spending money ahead of time, which I tried to refuse, but he insisted. He said this was about bonding and having a good time together. I flew to his home country first so I could spend a day with him and my granddad before we headed out for our 2-week holiday. My granddad is 85, tough as nails, but not in the best health, so I was glad to see him. That part was nice, but by the time we were packing for the trip, things already felt tense. Dad kept nitpicking every little thing I did, how I folded his shirts, how I packed his suitcase, even how I changed his bedding. At one point, he just snatched the duvet from me and said, "You're doing it wrong," which made me feel small. I tried to bring it up gently that night, but he brushed me off and said I was being too sensitive. The next morning, we headed to the airport. He was nervous about flying, and it was a 4-hour flight, so he had a few drinks before we boarded. When I say a few, I mean multiple rounds. He had me order some for him on my card, nearly 60 euros worth, and I saw him pull cash out for more. I stuck to Diet Cokes. On the plane, he took the window seat. I sat in the middle, and a man I didn't know sat on the aisle. Across from him were his family, wife and kids, and in front of us was another family with a little girl, maybe 3 years old. Before the plane even took off, Dad started going on about the physics of flying, what could go wrong, lift and drag, engine failures, black box recordings, the whole thing. It's his special interest, I guess. The guy next to me eventually told him, "You're going to scare your daughter." But Dad just laughed and kept going. During the safety demonstration, he wouldn't stop talking. I was trying to watch because I actually like to pay attention on planes, but he kept nudging me to look at things on the seat or pointing out some random fact about the plane model. Not long into the flight, he started bragging about how ChatGPT says I'm supremely intelligent and most people just can't keep up with me. Every time I tried to respond, he cut me off or contradicted me. I gave up after a while and put my headphones in, but every time I'd start reading, he'd tap my arm or point at something, and I'd have to take them out again. He kept tapping the seat in front of him while talking, which made the whole row shake. The mother in front turned around politely and asked him to stop because her daughter was trying to sleep. He apologized, but within minutes, he was doing it again. She asked him a second time, still very polite, and he nodded like he understood. Then did it again while looking for his dropped headphones. That was when the dad in front finally stood up. He said something like, "We've asked you 3 times now. She's awake now. Can you please be more considerate?" He wasn't rude, just firm, and that's when my dad lost it. He shouted, loud enough for the whole section of the plane to hear, "Forget you!" and launched into a rant about how he was just trying to stand up and how everyone was too sensitive. He swore a lot, loud and angry. The other guy just stood there and calmly asked, "Are you done?" before sitting down. Dad then turned his anger on me. He leaned toward me and demanded, "Do you agree with me or with them?" I said, "I think you were harsh," as gently as I could. I was embarrassed, my face was hot, and everyone was staring. He immediately said, "How dare you side with other people over me?" I told him I was allowed to have my own opinion. He glared at me and said, "Fine, we can go on separate holidays then." I turned away from him and tried to block him from my view with my arm, which just made him even angrier. "Are you blocking me out now?" he snapped. I said yes because I didn't want to lie. He started muttering under his breath and wouldn't stop ranting for a while, but eventually he went quiet and ignored me. At one point, Dad dropped his headphones again and couldn't find them, so he got up and went to speak to the flight attendant. While he was gone, someone quietly asked if I was okay. I tried to hold it together, but my emotions were all over the place, and I ended up bursting into tears. I felt almost guilty for crying. After all, he had been the worst to the family in front of us, not me. But the stress of the entire flight had caught up with me. The man sitting next to me gently told me not to let my dad bully me, and even mentioned which hotel his family was staying at, telling me I could come find them if I needed help. When Dad came back, things didn't get any better. He kept man-spreading so far into my seat space that I was practically pressed against the stranger next to me. When I asked him to move, he snapped, but managed to stop himself before raising his voice. By the time the plane began its descent, I was shaking. My chest felt tight, my hands were trembling, and I could feel tears welling up again. The man beside me noticed and quietly asked if I was okay. He calmed me down, asked about my book, and kept me distracted with light conversation until we finally landed. When we got off the plane, I made up my mind. I booked myself a flight back home that same day. I told Dad I was leaving. He wasn't happy, but I stayed calm and didn't argue. While waiting for my new flight, I got a text from him saying he had been robbed. Wallet, headphones, tobacco, everything gone. He claimed the family in front of us had been sliding his jacket forward and stealing from him. I honestly don't believe him. His story didn't make sense. I told him I was sorry he was robbed, but that he had been unkind to me and I hadn't done anything wrong. He launched into another rant about how I was siding with them, so I walked away and haven't heard from him since. Now I feel guilty. He worked hard and paid for this trip and was excited about spending time together. If he was really robbed, then that's awful, but I also feel like I had to get away. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Your dad is cruel and a narcissist. Go low contact with him. He's not a nice human being. If he wasn't your dad, you wouldn't put up with his treatment for 5 minutes. Your drunk father lost his wallet. Do not travel with him again until he gets help. You did the right thing booking a flight home. It doesn't sound like this trip would have been relaxing or fun anyway. He embarrassed you publicly, ignored your boundaries, and made you feel unsafe. You owe him nothing. Some people turn into totally different creatures on airplanes.
Exactly. OP's dad basically turned a 4-hour flight into a live drama performance.
But airplane drama hits different when it's your own parents starting it.
Right? OP just wanted a calm flight, and Dad turned it into a one-man lecture series.
But the MVP was the stranger sitting next to her.
Yeah, shout-outs to him. And her booking a flight home was the smartest thing she could do.
Better to be alone at home than stuck being referee for the rest of the trip. Entitled woman tries to make her own line, gets sent to the back of the real line. I had to go to the consulate this morning to get a travel visa, and everyone had warned me to show up early. The line there is notoriously slow, and you can't skip ahead unless you're there for a very specific type of emergency appointment. So I set my alarm painfully early and got there an hour before the place even opened. I still wasn't the first. There were about 10 people ahead of me, all clutching folders or envelopes with their documents. Everyone looked like they had mentally prepared for a long, boring wait. By the time we were half an hour from opening, the line had doubled and stretched around the block. People were scrolling on their phones, sipping coffee, just quietly waiting. Then this woman walked up, well-dressed, sunglasses, the whole "I don't wait in lines" vibe. She stopped, looked at the long line, and then instead of heading to the back like everyone else, she walked up to the very first person in line and stood right next to them. Not behind them, next to them, like she had just been saving a spot there all morning. The guy at the front kind of glanced at her, then back at his phone. Nobody said anything yet because technically she wasn't doing anything, just standing there. About 10 minutes later, another person showed up and asked her if she was there for pickups, which is what you do if you're just there to collect a completed visa or passport. She said yes, and just like that, the newcomer lined up behind her. Soon, a couple more people showed up, asking the same thing, and joined what was slowly becoming a second line right next to us. A few people from way back in our line overheard, assumed it was legit, and actually left their spots to stand behind her too. At this point, those of us in the main line were giving each other the side eye like, are we really watching this happen? Nobody wanted to be the first to confront her. You could feel the tension building. Half the crowd was quietly fuming. The other half was whispering to each other about whether they had just been standing in the wrong line this whole time. Finally, 9:30 rolled around and the guard came out. He took one look at the two lines, stopped walking, and loudly said, "One line only," while pointing to the original line. The look on everyone's faces was priceless. The guard walked straight over to the second line and started waving people back toward the end of the original line. The folks who had accidentally joined the fake line looked panicked and started hustling to get back to their original spots, but of course, they had already lost them. And then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The entitled woman, the one who had started the whole thing, tried to argue that she had been there early and had formed a pickup line because it was more efficient. The guard didn't even entertain it. He pointed at the back of the very long winding line that now had maybe over 100 people in it and told her that she could either get in line there or come back another day. She stood there for a few seconds, like she couldn't believe this was happening, and then finally turned and stalked off toward the back. I won't lie, watching her get sent to the very end of the line was incredibly satisfying. If she had just gotten in line like everyone else, she would have been maybe 30th. Instead, she ended up being around 100th, and everyone in the original line looked just a little bit happier while shuffling forward. I did feel a little bad for the people who honestly thought her pickup line was official and lost their place completely. But for the woman who decided she could just make her own rules, it was perfect instant karma. That actually makes sense if there's normally a separate pickup line. Maybe she had been there on a day when the sign was up and just assumed she could recreate the system herself. Still kind of wild to decide you can just start an official-looking line on your own though. Honestly, I'm glad the guard clarified because everyone was about to get confused and frustrated for nothing.
Imagine that, deciding you're too good for the line that everyone else has been standing in for an hour.
And then convincing other people to join you.
The way the guard shut it down though, no debate, no back and forth, just truth.
I bet she replayed that walk to the very end of the line in her head all day.
And still somehow told someone later that she was the victim.
He did what? A few years back, I stopped at the grocery store on the way home to grab some potato wedges for my wife. It was one of those evenings where the deli counter had a bit of a wait, but nothing major, maybe 4 or 5 people ahead of me. I took my spot at the end of the line and pulled out my phone to pass the time. Then she walked in. This woman, who we'll call Karen, strolled right up with a younger girl who looked like her daughter or granddaughter. Karen didn't even glance at the line. She went straight to the counter and stood near the front like she expected to be served next. In the country where I live, senior citizens get a lot of perks. Free movie tickets on certain days, restaurant discounts, even priority lanes when they're available. But if there isn't a designated priority line, most of them wait like everyone else. Not this Karen though. The deli worker, who deserves a medal for patience, told her she'd have to wait her turn. Karen glared at him, but did step back, sort of. Not all the way to the end of the line, just off to the side like a cat getting ready to pounce. As each customer finished and left, Karen would edge forward, trying to sneak in. Each time, the worker calmly reminded her to wait. Each time, she got a little more annoyed. By the time there were only 2 people ahead of me, I could hear her muttering to the girl, saying how ridiculous this was, and how she was a senior citizen who just wanted some wedges. And that's when I knew exactly what I was going to do. When the guy right in front of me got his order, Karen tried again to jump in. I spoke up and told her the end of the line was behind me. The deli worker and I stood there waiting for her to move, which she eventually did, stomping back behind me. Now, here's where things get fun. I looked at the tray and realized there were barely any wedges left, definitely not enough for both of us. I asked the deli worker for more than what was there, so he said they'd need to cook a fresh batch. He told me it would be a few minutes, which was fine by me. I could feel Karen kept glaring at me, like she thought this was my fault personally. When the new wedges finally came out, Karen started to step forward again, but I reminded her that I was still next. She crossed her arms and glared, but stayed where she was. The worker looked at me and asked how many wedges I wanted. Me. I'll take all of them. Him. All of them? Me. All of them. He cracked a little smile, scooped every last wedge into the container, weighed them, and handed them over. I paid and started to walk away slowly, just so I could hear what would happen next. Sure enough, behind me, I heard Karen shriek, "He did what?" loud enough to turn a few heads in the store. I didn't turn back, but not gonna lie, it was tempting to look her dead in the eye and eat one right there. But alas, that idea came to me as I recounted the tale to my wife at home. Best $14 I've ever spent. As someone who has worked in a deli, I've had similar things happen to me. I can confidently say, you made that deli worker's day by doing that. I guarantee that guy still tells people about the time an inconsiderate customer got her comeuppance. I've got one for you. Super Bowl Sunday. I forgot to get the deli meat and cheese for the game. I knew it was going to be a long line, but traditions must be kept. I was right.
long line. I grabbed my number and immediately noticed that Mr. Snooty Pants was getting impatient. He had his number and there were 5 people in front of him, but he was tired of waiting. He started yelling at the deli workers to hurry up. He was beyond rude, calling them names and insulting them. I calmly said, "Sir, it's Super Bowl Sunday. If you wanted quicker service, you should have been here yesterday, when I'm sure the line was much shorter. They're doing their job and they don't need your harassment. Keep calm or there's going to be a problem." Snooty Pants was a foot taller than me, but I wasn't having it. He looked appalled that he had been called out, but he shut up. When it was my turn, I apologized for Snooty Pants and then asked for 1 pound of roast beef and cheddar. The deli worker smiled at me, cut the meat and cheese, dropped them on the scale, printed the ticket for 1 pound, and then dropped another ½ pound of each on the pile before wrapping everything up. I gave the worker a quick smile and got out of the way so they could help the next person in line.
Okay, this is the most petty and perfect thing I've heard all week.
Right? Every single wedge? That's top-tier revenge.
And her dramatic shriek at the end, that's the cherry on top.
Am I the jerk for refusing to eat all of my wife's food? So I, 37 male, and my wife, who's 35, are cooling down from an argument right now based around me telling her, point blank, to make less food in the future or I'm going to continue not eating it. The backstory is pretty simple and nothing to the point of threatening our marriage or anything. I'm getting up in years as a basketball player and these knees are starting to go. I had eventually reached around 196 pounds at 5'9" around the tail end of lockdown. I knew I had to make a change and at least get down to my pre-lockdown weight of around 163 pounds. Now I'm actually all the way down to 70 kilograms right now. I'm happy with my progress and I'm set on making this my new normal moving forward into old age and beyond. But my wife isn't exactly thrilled I've lost all this weight. There aren't love handles for her to play with anymore. Most devastating for her is that I don't eat nearly as much as I used to. We trade off cooking duties every day, and when it's my turn, I usually make just enough. But when she cooks, there's always enough food for another full plate. My wife is tiny, so she can't eat it, and I'm now a guy who doesn't eat it either. I always suggest that we save it and have it for dinner the next day. I don't eat breakfast, and lunches are provided by my work. And while that worked for a while, eventually the leftovers just ended up in the bin, and she'd ask me to cook something new instead. Although it's been fine more or less, she doesn't hold back on commenting. To her, men should be eating seconds or thirds. It's just the Japanese way to her. She's Japanese and we live in the country. And she always recalls her father enthusiastically asking for seconds and thirds. She's feeling more and more ashamed that her husband doesn't like her cooking. But I do. Her cooking is fantastic, and I eat as much as I can when she makes it. It's just that she makes too much now. We've had talks about her portion sizes, but it always circles back to letting her cook her way. This all boiled over earlier tonight when she asked if I wanted a second serving of a delicious fried chicken, and I said, "No, I'm way too full." She responded, "Are you just going to throw away all this chicken then? That's so wasteful." I knew immediately I was giving the wrong response, but I still said it. "You are wasting all this chicken. I told you to make less food. I've been telling you for months. I don't see you eating the chicken either. You're the one wasting money and time making all this extra food that I won't eat, and that's not going to change." Now she's in bed after a cry, and nothing from me gave her any comfort. I'm downstairs writing this. I know my response was wrong in that moment, but have I been a jerk about this entire weight loss journey, or at least as it pertains to my wife's cooking? Should I have just sucked it up and eaten all of her food? Not the jerk. You've spoken up about this plenty. At this point, she should need to eat any leftovers that she produces. Hopefully this isn't the case, but she may be subconsciously sabotaging your weight loss. Not the jerk. It's an Asian thing. Food equals love. I'm Chinese and my mom always overcooked, and then would comment on all of our weights. It took over 20 years and all the kids moving out for her to finally cook less, or at least just enough that everyone's finished with no leftovers when we visit her. Just tell your wife you don't view food the same way. Food is sustenance, and overeating is a bad habit. At your age, excess weight leads to health problems, and if she loves you, she wouldn't want that for you. Just keep repeating that while reassuring her that you still love her even if you want to eat less of what she makes. Am I the jerk for not telling my ex-wife that we lived in a rental apartment? Back in 2008, when I started university, I rented a 2-bedroom apartment with my ex-girlfriend at the time, along with my friend and his girlfriend. We got a great deal on it because the owner of the place lost her job due to the economic situation back then and decided to try her luck abroad where she still lives. Years went by, and after university, my friend and his girlfriend decided to find a place of their own. Since we had full-time jobs, renting this apartment together didn't seem expensive anymore. It also didn't seem costly to rent alone after we broke up sometime later. So there I was, alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in the central part of the city. The owner decided she was too lazy to deal with bills and stuff every month, so she made arrangements for me to pay everything directly. Since I had earned her trust, I still pay her monthly rent, which is very cheap by today's standards, and I handle everything else with her authorization. Because of the perfect location, my second bedroom was basically a free B&B for my friends who didn't live in the city, and I didn't mind. It's good to have company when you live alone. In 2020, I met a girl who was in a rush to get married, and since I was madly in love, we tied the knot in 2021. For some reason, I never told her the story of how I rented the place or that it was a rental at all. It just never came up. I had gotten so used to the fact that I'm an authorized representative with the building cooperative, etc., that I refer to it as my place. As time went on, our relationship started to cool down, and we realized we weren't perfect for each other after all. So, divorce it is. We completed the paperwork and she's moving out. A few days ago, I received an email from her with a real estate valuation document attached. While I wasn't at home, she spent 500 euros for someone to evaluate an apartment that doesn't belong to us, and wrote that I'd probably have to take out a loan to pay her 50% of the value. I replied to her, "Didn't I ever tell you that this place is a rental? Why would you even assume I can afford a 2-bedroom apartment in the city center? You know where I work and how much I earn." She called me and screamed that I had lied to her for years by hiding the fact that the apartment was a rental. Then she said,
Well, I'll take the car since we got that together.
It was quiet for a moment, and then I told her, "You do know that's a lease, right? The owner of the car is the bank." Then she demanded that I pay for the valuation, to which I replied, "I didn't ask you to do it." She called me a jerk and ended the call. Of course, she told our whole group of friends how I lied to her throughout the entire marriage. There was a discussion in a group chat about whether it was a lie or not and whether I was being a jerk. Some friends agreed with me while others sided with her. My best friend told me that this would be a perfect topic for a Reddit thread. So now I ask you, Reddit, am I the jerk? It's odd you didn't tell her, but also odd that it wasn't part of your conversation about life and who was paying for things and how and so on. Not the jerk. OP. She did cover about 50% of the utility bills as she wanted to contribute, and it was no secret that I had been living there for a very long time. I just never spelt it out that this is a rental. I think she assumed I owned it because we did some maintenance there together that you normally don't do in a rental, changed the wallpaper in the living room, and got a few appliances when old ones broke down. Not the jerk. I wonder why she was in such a rush to get married. Was her plan all along to get married and then take you for half of everything after a couple of years? Not the jerk. Why would she be entitled to half even if you did own it? OP. In some countries, you share everything you own even if you had them before marriage. It's unfortunate, but you hear about it all the time. Am I the jerk for telling my sister I don't know if I love her after finding out about her 5-year affair? My sister, who's 32, moved in with me 5 months ago because she got pregnant from what she said was a one-time thing. I love my sister, so of course I let her stay. With my husband overseas for 6 more months, it was actually nice to have her around, as I care about her deeply. On Monday, I came home to find my sister and an unfamiliar woman in a screaming match on my doorstep. I had no idea what was happening, but I saw the woman poking my pregnant sister's shoulder, so I stepped in. I sent my sister inside, and she begged me to get rid of the woman. Confused, but wanting to defuse the situation, I asked the woman to leave. That's when the woman started yelling, asking if I was also sleeping with her husband. I was completely baffled. She then revealed that my sister had been having an affair with her husband for 5 years. She had everything, printed chats, photos, emails, receipts. It was all overwhelming and I didn't want to go through it, but some key facts came out. My sister knew the man was married and had been his mistress for 5 years. This woman was a stay-at-home mom with 4 kids, one of whom has a severe disability. Her husband knew about my sister's pregnancy and had even taken my sister on a baby moon to celebrate. Despite his repeated lies about leaving his wife, my sister was emotionally invested and believed he eventually would. I apologized to the woman, explained that I didn't know anything about the affair, and asked her to leave to avoid the situation escalating further.
Before leaving, she gave me her number and pleaded with me not to let her husband stay at my house. I promised her no man would be stepping foot in my home. Inside, my sister begged me not to believe the woman, calling her a vindictive ex-wife. I told her we could look up the marriage records to see if a divorce had been filed. We ended up having a huge fight. My sister kept insisting that I wouldn't understand because they loved each other, but he just couldn't leave his wife. I told her she was being foolish and naive. The next day, I told her she could stay because I didn't want her to become a financial burden on the other woman, but I also said I didn't want to engage with her for now. When she asked if I still loved her, I replied, "Right now, I can't say I do. I will always help my nephew and won't endanger you, but I don't like you right now. You've shown me you're not trustworthy." I explained that I no longer trusted her around my husband or anything else, and I made her sign a tenants agreement. She has been begging for forgiveness, but I told her there's nothing to forgive. I just don't know who she is anymore. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Your sister's actions were incredibly hurtful and harmful. It's understandable that you need time to process this and decide whether you can rebuild trust with her. I've been where that poor wife is. It's the worst feeling in the world. Years later, I still wonder how that chick was so naive and careless. We weren't friends, but she knew of me, and she believed his lies that we were unhappy and were separating. They always believe the lies and believe they're the special one he will be with forever. Well, I kicked him out, and they lasted a few months before he was calling, telling me she was crazy. Surprise, surprise, that's one of the lies he told her about me, and also told me about literally every one of his exes. So yeah, giant shock. Not the jerk. Your sister is just another sad, delusional homewrecker. I'm sorry you have to live with that knowledge now. Keep her away from your husband. Edit. Even if you trust your husband completely, don't put him in that position to have to defend himself and fend her off if something happens. Y'all are so dramatic. Okay, so your sister hooked up with another woman's husband. Who's really the jerk in this situation? 1000% the husband. Is your sister a jerk? Yeah, but only to a fraction of the degree of the husband. So she's your sister. She did something stupid. She hurt other people. So you don't love her anymore? She was just someone's affair. It's not a victimless crime, but it's also not your sister's sole responsibility or even her at main fault. So you don't love her?
What happens when Karen scams her own stepfather for $10,000? She gets busted. That's exactly what happens in our next video. It just popped up on your screen. Give it a tap with your thumb or a click with your remote. Karen and I are already waiting for you. See you soon.